You're lying awake at 3 in the morning doing mental math. How much do I need to retire? $1 million? $2 million? And more importantly, when can I stop throwing money into these accounts every single month? Here's what nobody tells you. There's an exact mathematical moment when your contributions stop mattering, when your portfolio grows faster than you could ever save, when compounding takes over and you're basically just along for the ride. Most people think you need to keep investing until you're 65. That's garbage. The real question is, when does your money start working harder than you do? Today, we're walking through the exact crossover point where your portfolio becomes self-sustaining, why it happens faster than you think, and how to engineer your life around hitting that moment as early as possible. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to understand the actual math behind financial independence. The crossover point is simple. It's the moment when your portfolio's annual growth exceeds your annual contributions. That's it. That's when you shift from pulling your portfolio forward to your portfolio pulling itself. And once you understand this concept, your entire relationship with saving changes. Let's walk through a concrete example. Say you're investing $20,000 per year and capturing a 7% annual return. When you have $100,000 invested, that 7% growth gives you $7,000. Your $20,000 contribution is still doing most of the heavy lifting. You're the engine here. But watch what happens as the portfolio grows. At $300,000 invested, that 7% return generates $21,000 in growth. Now your contributions and your growth are roughly equal. You're sharing the load with compounding. This is where things start to get interesting. At $500,000 invested, 7% growth gives you $35,000. Your $20,000 contribution suddenly looks small next to what the market just handed you. Compounding is now the primary driver. You're the passenger. And at $1 million invested, 7% growth generates $70,000. At this point, your $20,000 contribution is basically a rounding error. The portfolio is taken over completely. Here's why this matters psychologically. Early on, you feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. Every paycheck, you're scraping together money to invest, and it feels slow. You're doing all the work, but somewhere around that $300,000 to $500,000 mark, depending on how much you save, the boulder starts rolling on its own. You're no longer pushing. You're just making sure you don't get in the way. Now, you could argue that contributions always matter, and technically, yes, every dollar you invest compounds over time. But what we're identifying here is when the burden shifts. When you stop being the primary driver of your wealth, and compounding becomes the star of the show. Think of it like a rocket launch. Early on, you need massive amounts of fuel to get off the ground. That's your savings rate. But once you hit escape velocity, momentum carries you forward. That's compounding. The crossover point is when you reach escape velocity. And once you're there, the game changes completely. The beauty of understanding this is it gives you a target. You're not just blindly saving until 65, hoping it works out. You're aiming for a specific dollar amount where your money starts working harder than you do. And once you hit that number, you have options. You could keep contributing and accelerate your timeline. Or you could ease off the gas and let compounding do the rest. The choice is yours. But here's where it gets really interesting. What happens if you stop contributing at different points along the way? Because understanding this trade-off is how you figure out whether grinding for another decade is actually worth it, or if you can ease off earlier than you think. Let's stick with our example of investing $20,000 per year at 7% returns. If you keep contributing without stopping, you hit $1 million in about 23 years. That's the baseline. 23 years of consistent contributions and you're a millionaire. Not bad. But what if you stopped at $100,000 invested? It takes you 5 years to build up that $100,000 with your $20,000 annual contributions. If you stopped there and let compounding do the rest, it would take another 35 years to reach $1 million. That's 40 years total from when you started. So stopping at $100,000 costs you 17 extra years compared to the baseline. That's a brutal trade-off. You're not even close to escape velocity yet. Now let's say you pushed to $300,000 before stopping. That takes about 11 years of contributing. From there, compounding alone needs another 18 years to carry you to $1 million. That's 29 years total. You just cut the timeline down significantly. Stopping at 300,000 only costs you 6 extra years compared to never stopping. 6 years might be worth it if you desperately need breathing room in your budget. And here's where it gets wild. If you grind until you hit $500,000 invested, that takes about 15 years of contributions. If you stop there, compounding could double it to 1 million in just 11 more years. That's 26 years total. You're only 3 years behind the baseline of contributing the entire way through. Think about that for a second. You could stop investing entirely at $500,000 and only delay your $1 million milestone by 3 years. That's the power of reaching critical mass. Once you're at that level, compounding is doing so much work that your contributions barely move the needle anyway. This is why the crossover point matters. It's not just some abstract concept. It's the moment when you can make a real choice. Do you want to keep grinding and shave off a few years? Or do you want the freedom of not having to scrape together $20,000 every single year? For some people, those 3 extra years are worth the trade-off. For others, they'd rather keep contributing and hit the goal faster. The key insight here is that the further along you go, the less your contributions matter in relative terms. Early on, stopping is devastating. You lose decades. But once you hit that halfway point, once you're around $300,000 to $500,000 depending on your situation, stopping contributions doesn't destroy your timeline. It just stretches it out a bit. And that might be a trade-off worth making depending on what else is happening in your life. This brings us to one of the most powerful frameworks in personal finance. It's called coast fire, and it's basically the art of front-loading your suffering so you can coast for decades afterward. Here's how it works. You save and invest aggressively early on until you hit a specific number where compounding alone will carry you to your retirement goal without you contributing another dollar. Once you hit that number, you stop. You're done. The portfolio is on autopilot. You can take a lower-paying job you actually enjoy, you can work part-time, you can travel for a year. Whatever. The pressure is off because your retirement is already handled. Let's walk through the math. Say you want $2 million by the time you're 65 and you're 30 years old right now. If you can capture 7% annual returns, how much do you need invested today to hit $2 million in 35 years without adding anything? The answer is $187,000. That's your coast fire number. If you hit $187,000 invested by age 30 and you never contribute another dime, compounding alone gets you to $2 million by 65. The math just works. And that changes everything about how you think about your 20s. Now, is hitting $187,000 by 30 realistic? For some people, absolutely. If you graduate college at 22 with no debt, land a decent job, and live like you're still in college for 8 years while investing aggressively, you can hit it. For others, it's not realistic. Maybe you're starting from zero at 30, or you have student loans, or you live in an expensive city. But even if you can't hit the exact number, the framework is still useful because it forces you to think about the trade-off. What if you hit $187,000 by 35 instead? Well, now you have 30 years until 65. So that same one, 187,000 grows to about 1.4 million. Not quite 2 million, but you're most of the way there. Or maybe you push until 40 and hit $300,000 invested. From there, compounding gets you to 2.3 million by 65. You overshot your goal and bought yourself even more flexibility. The psychological power of coast fire is massive. You're not just saving blindly, hoping it works out someday. You're targeting a specific milestone that fundamentally changes your relationship with work. Once you hit your coast fire number, you're not desperate for the paycheck anymore. You're not stuck in a job you hate because you need the income to fund your retirement accounts. You're choosing to work because it adds value to your life, not because you have to. And here's the kicker. Coast fire is essentially you choosing your crossover point deliberately and then walking away. You're saying, I'm going to grind until my portfolio hits critical mass, and then I'm done. I'm letting compounding take over. It's the ultimate expression of understanding how wealth actually builds. You front-load the effort when your time and energy are high, and then you let mathematics do the rest. The beauty is, you can adjust the numbers to fit your situation. Want 3 million by 65? Your coast fire number at 30 is $280,000. Want to retire at 60 instead? Your number goes up. Want to coast starting at 35 instead of 30? Your number drops. The framework adapts. But the core insight stays the same. Hit critical mass early, then let compounding carry you home. So let's talk about the milestones along the way. The moments that remind you compounding is working and you're not just throwing money into a void. First, $10,000 invested. This might not sound huge, but it's massive psychologically. When you're starting out, you're saving $50 a week, or maybe 10% of your paycheck, and it feels like you're getting nowhere. Then one day you check your account and it says $10,000. That's real money. That's proof your efforts are paying off. You should absolutely celebrate that milestone because it's the first time you realize this whole investing thing might actually work. First, $100,000. This is the milestone Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett obsess over. They call it the hardest 100,000 you'll ever make, but also the most important. And they're right. Once you hit 6 figures invested, compounding starts to feel real. Let's say you get to $100,000, and then we have a year like 2024 where the S&P returns 25%. Your portfolio just grew by $25,000. That's more than most people save in an entire year. That's when you start to understand what momentum actually means. The crossover point when portfolio growth exceeds contributions. We've been talking about this the whole video, but it deserves to be on the milestone list because it's a psychological shift. This is when you look at your annual statement and realize the market added more to your account than you did. Your money is officially working harder than you are, and that moment hits differently for everyone depending on how much you save. But when it happens, you feel it. The burden shifts. You're no longer the only one pulling the cart. When your portfolio generates more in a year than your job pays you, this one is wild. I remember hearing a story about someone explaining this concept to a bank teller in their 20s. They said, imagine your portfolio growing by more than your annual salary in a single year. The teller looked at them like they were insane and said, that never happens. That's not even realistic. But here's the thing. It absolutely happens if you stay in the game long enough. When you have $1 million invested and the market returns 10%, that's $100,000 in growth. If your salary is $80,000, your portfolio just out-earned you. And that's not luck. That's mathematics. Hitting your coast fire number. This is when you know you could stop saving altogether and compounding would carry you to your goal. You might keep contributing anyway, but there's incredible relief in knowing you don't have to. The pressure is off. You've reached escape velocity. 1x your annual income saved. Fidelity loves this benchmark. They say by your 30s, you should have 1x your annual income invested. It's a solid target that puts you ahead of most people and sets you up for a comfortable retirement. $1 million invested. Look, there's nothing magical about $1 million in practical terms. Inflation has chipped away at its significance, but culturally, it's still a marker. It's still fun to hit that round number and see an extra comma in your account. Just make sure you're chasing goals that actually matter to you, not just what society says is important. When your portfolio covers your basic living expenses. This is a huge milestone for peace of mind. When your portfolio generates enough annually to cover housing, transportation, healthcare, the essentials. You're not covering luxuries yet, but you have security. If you lost your job tomorrow, your portfolio would keep you alive. That's your first real taste of financial freedom. When your portfolio covers your entire lifestyle, including luxuries. This is the traditional retirement vision. Your portfolio generates enough to cover everything. Housing, food, transportation, vacations, the life you actually want to live. For most people, this takes decades. But once you're here, you've made it. When you work because you want to, not because you have to. This is the ultimate milestone. Your portfolio sustains your lifestyle completely, but maybe you keep working anyway. Not for the paycheck. For meaning. For legacy. For something bigger than money. That's when you know you've won the game. Here's the thing about the crossover point. There's no single magic number where this happens for everyone. It depends entirely on your situation, your savings rate, and what the market does. And understanding these variables is how you figure out where you actually stand. If you save more each year, your contributions matter for longer. Let's say you're an aggressive saver putting away $40,000 annually instead of $20,000. Well, at that rate, It might take until your portfolio hits $600,000 to $800,000 before compounding becomes the primary driver. You're contributing so much that even a 7% return on $500,000, which is $35,000, still gets dwarfed by your $40,000 contributions. You're the engine for a longer stretch of the journey. But if you save less each year, compounding becomes meaningful sooner. Say you're putting away $10,000 annually. Once your portfolio hits $150,000 to $250,000, that 7% return starts outpacing what you're adding. Your contributions matter, but compounding takes over faster because the bar is lower. Then there's the return variable. If the market grows faster or slower, the tipping point shifts. This one's intuitive. If you're capturing 8% returns instead of 7, compounding accelerates. Your portfolio grows faster, which means it reaches that critical mass where growth exceeds contributions sooner. But if you're only capturing 5% returns, maybe because you're more conservative or the market's been rough, the crossover point gets delayed. It takes longer for your portfolio to grow enough to outpace your contributions. This is why you can't just copy someone else's plan and expect the same results. Your crossover point is unique to you. It's shaped by how much you earn, how much you save, how you invest, and what the market does over the years you're invested. And here's the bigger truth. Investing spans decades. If you only focus on the massive milestones like retirement or hitting $1 million, you're going to lose motivation. Those goals are so far away that they don't feel real. But if you're willing to celebrate the smaller wins along the way, the first 10,000, the first 100,000, the crossover points where compounding starts pulling its weight, you stay engaged. You stay excited, you keep going. Wealth isn't built by one paycheck or one lucky year. It's built by time, consistency, and compounding quietly working in the background. The crossover point isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It's the moment you realize the system is working. Your money is finally working harder than you are. And once you hit that point, everything changes. And it will change faster if you stop spending money on these items that are no longer worth it.